You know that feeling when you're sitting in a restaurant, looking at the menu, and you catch yourself doing the math? Like, okay, if I get the pasta instead of the steak, I save $11, and if I skip the appetizer, and then you look up and your date is staring at you, and you realize you've been doing mental arithmetic for 2 full minutes instead of having a conversation. That was me. Every single time. Every purchase. Every decision. Just constant, exhausting financial anxiety. And then I thought, what would happen if I just stopped? What if I lived like money wasn't the thing I was constantly rationing? What if I lived like someone who didn't have to think about whether the guacamole costs extra? So I tried it. For 30 days, I lived like a millionaire. And what I found on the other side genuinely changed how I think about money. Not the spending part, the psychology part. And that's what we're getting into today. My name is Oric, and I spend way too much time thinking about the psychology of financial decisions. If you're someone who knows exactly how much is in your checking account at any given moment, but still somehow feels broke, make sure to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up if this helps you out. Here's the thing about millionaires that nobody talks about. It's not actually the money. I know, hear me out. According to a 2023 study from Northwestern Mutual, 48% of Americans consider themselves financially anxious. But here's what's wild. That number barely drops as income goes up. People making $100,000 a year still report significant financial stress. People making $200,000 still lose sleep over money. You'd think at some point the anxiety would just go away. It doesn't, at least not automatically. So before I get into what I actually did during these 30 days, I need to tell you what living like a millionaire is not, because most people get this completely wrong, and it's why most rich for a day experiments on YouTube are basically useless for actually learning anything. Living like a millionaire is not about spending money you don't have. It's not about leasing a Ferrari and flying first class on credit. That's living like someone pretending to be a millionaire, which honestly describes a shocking percentage of people with actual high incomes. The Federal Reserve found that roughly 40% of Americans couldn't cover a $400 emergency without borrowing money or selling something, and that includes a lot of people who look very wealthy from the outside. What I was actually testing was the psychological operating system, the decisions, the mindset, the relationship with money that wealthy people have internalized over time. Okay, so let me break down what I actually did. 30 days, 4 rules. Rule 1. I stopped tracking every small purchase under $20. Not because it doesn't matter, it does, we'll get back to that, but I wanted to experience what it felt like to make decisions without the constant micro-anxiety of recording every coffee. Rule 2. I said yes to one social or professional opportunity per week without first calculating whether I could afford it in the strictest sense. Dinner with someone interesting? Yes. A workshop that cost $200 but had real learning value? Yes. Rule 3. I invested first. Before I spent anything, I moved money into savings and investments the way wealthy people actually do, automatically, at the start of the month, not whatever's left over at the end. There's a massive psychological difference between those two approaches, and I'll explain exactly why in a minute. Rule 4. I audited my time the same way I audited my money. This one was the most uncomfortable. Week 1 was honestly just disorienting. I'm at a coffee shop and I order the drink I actually want instead of the slightly cheaper version. That's a $3 difference. $3. And I felt guilty. Actually guilty. And I sat there thinking, I have spent more than $3 on things I can't even remember and felt nothing. But this intentional choice to spend $3 extra on something I wanted? Guilt. That's not a rational relationship with money. That's a trauma response dressed up as financial responsibility. Here's what most people don't realize. The way you feel about small purchases has almost nothing to do with whether those purchases are actually affecting your financial situation. It's about your money story, the narrative you developed usually before age 12 about what money means, who deserves it, and whether you're allowed to have it. I'm not making this up. Research from the Journal of Financial Therapy, yes, that's a real journal, shows that most adults' core financial behaviors are established by age 7. 7! And we spend the next 50 decades operating on programming we didn't consciously choose. By week 2, something started shifting. Here's what I noticed. When I stopped spending mental energy on micro decisions, should I get the guacamole, should I take an Uber or wait for the bus, I had more cognitive bandwidth for actual decisions. Big ones, the ones that actually move the needle. There's a concept in psychology called decision fatigue. It was famously studied in a 2011 paper looking at Israeli parole board judges. They approved parole about 65% of the time at the start of the day, and that number dropped to almost zero by late afternoon. Same judges, same types of cases. The only variable was how many decisions they'd already made. Their brains were tired. Now apply that to your finances. If you are spending mental energy all day managing hundreds of micro spending decisions, you have less capacity left over to think clearly about the decisions that actually matter. Whether to refinance your mortgage, whether to negotiate a raise, whether to start that side business, whether to move your savings into an account that actually pays more than 0.01%. The math here is actually pretty stark. Let's say you spend 45 minutes a day in low-level financial anxiety, second-guessing purchases, checking your account balance repeatedly, calculating whether you can afford something for the third time. That's over 270 hours a year. What could you do with 270 extra hours? One serious skill development, one side income stream, one project that changes your trajectory. Now, you might be thinking, Auric, this sounds great, but I genuinely don't have extra money. I'm not anxious about $3 coffees for fun. I'm anxious because the math is actually tight. I hear you, and that's real. I'm not going to stand here and tell you that budgeting anxiety is purely a mindset problem when rent is genuinely due and your account is genuinely low. That would be insulting. But here's where it gets really interesting, because even in that situation, especially in that situation, the psychological approach changes the outcome. Let me give you a concrete example with numbers. Person A makes $4,000 a month. They save whatever's left over at the end of the month. After rent, food, bills, and the general chaos of living, they usually have $0 to $200 left. Some months, nothing. They are anxious every day because the account balance is a constant stress signal. Person B makes the exact same $4,000, but on the first of the month, they move $300 to a high-yield savings account and $100 to an investment account. Now they have $3,600 to work with. Yes, it's slightly tighter month to month, but, and this is the psychological flip, they stop experiencing their spending as failure because the savings already happened. They're not trying to find willpower at the end of a month when they're tired and the account is low. The decision was made when they were fresh, automated, done. Over 12 months, Person A has saved somewhere between $0 and $2,400 depending on discipline. Person B has saved $3,600 plus whatever investment growth occurred. More importantly, Person B has spent 12 months fewer in daily financial anxiety. That reduced stress has downstream effects on everything: job performance, relationships, health decisions, sleep. You cannot put a price on 12 months of not waking up at 3 a.m. thinking about your checking account. Week 3 is when I started getting uncomfortable in a different way. The time audit. I tracked every hour for a week, and what I found was that I had been valuing my time at approximately $0. Literally, I would spend 2 hours researching how to save $15 on a purchase. 2 hours. If that purchase is the difference between eating and not eating, okay, that math makes sense. But for most things, it doesn't. Wealthy people, actual wealthy people, not the ones performing wealth, have a very different relationship with time. They ask, what's the best use of this hour, before they ask, how can I minimize this expense? And it's not because they're lazy or they don't care about money. It's because they've internalized that an hour of high-value work or an hour of genuine rest that makes the next day more productive is worth more than an hour of optimization on something small. There's a study from Harvard Business School, and I want to be careful here because I'm summarizing, not just throwing a name at you, that found people who prioritize time over money report higher levels of life satisfaction consistently across income levels. Not because time is more important than money in some abstract way, but because how you think about time reveals how efficiently you're converting your life energy into outcomes. Okay, so let me break down what I actually did. 30 days, 4 rules.
My first rule was to stop tracking every small purchase under $20. Not because it doesn't matter, it does, we'll get back to that. But I wanted to experience what it felt like to make decisions without the constant micro-anxiety of recording every coffee. My second rule was to say yes to one social or professional opportunity per week without first calculating whether I could afford it in the strictest sense. Dinner with someone interesting? Yes. A workshop that cost $200 but had real learning value? Yes. My third rule was to invest first. Before I spent anything, I moved money into savings and investments the way wealthy people actually do, automatically, at the start of the month, not whatever's left over at the end. There's a massive psychological difference between those two approaches, and I'll explain exactly why in a minute. My fourth rule was to audit my time the same way I audited my money. This one was the most uncomfortable. Week 1 was